Welcome to Under the Covers. I am your host, Siren, and tonight I am your guide through the depths of the darkness. Pour yourself a drink, do some gardening, and curl
This
up under the
happened when I was
covers
4,
as we
so I
surrender
don't remember
into the
all the
abyss.
minor details, but my mom does, and we kind of trace back this whole thing when I suddenly got reminded of it because my reading of a similar story. I'll try my best to explain and then add the bits from my mom's memory. We used to live in a very rural area, and at that time we owned a small farm. Most people in that area had their own farmlands, but the houses were located about 5 miles away from the area where all the farms were. It was the time when we only had one cell phone that my father used to keep with him at all times, and no landline at our house. There was a public telephone booth 2 blocks down that a lot of people in the neighborhood used. It was around summer, I think, and there was a group of gypsies, and they were notorious for stealing the crops and would also rob people occasionally, especially women working alone at the farms. My father had a regular job besides managing the farms, so he'd leave very early and would be back very late at night. Normally, my mom would manage the farms by herself, but since the gypsies were going around robbing people, she stopped going there for a while, and I was also very young then. Most people in our neighborhood worked at their farms starting early in the morning and until evening, so our neighborhood was pretty desolate during the daytime, except for a few people 3-4 blocks down to our house. Mom was very careful about locking the main doors and windows, so there wasn't much to worry about. My gramps from my mom's side was visiting us one of these days, and he's like a very tall, big guy. I was playing in the dining room table, my back facing the main entrance, and my mom was in the kitchen. While Gramps was inside the guest room, since he just arrived, maybe changing or freshening up. The thing was, my mom forgot to lock the main entrance after Gramps came in and had no idea about it. I was facing my mom, telling her about whatever little me was doing, and she was facing the entrance, and I clearly remember feeling terrified by the sudden change of expression on my mom's face. Now that I'm more aware of the wide range of emotions more than a 4-year-old, I can tell it was a mixture of dread, shock, and pure anxiety. She left whatever she was doing in an instant, and now she was standing between me and the entrance, shouting with a kitchen knife in her hand. And as I peeked from behind her, there was a woman, and she had a sickle in her hand inside of our house. She was standing there trying to make a conversation as if it was normal. She definitely thought that we were the only 2 people in the house. She was wearing lots of metal jewelry and stuff. The gypsies wore that stuff. Mom was telling me to run to Gramps, and I was crying, not wanting to leave her because I could probably sense the danger. It had only been like 2 minutes, and my Gramps came running and yelling from the other room, in the far back, telling the woman to get the fuck out of our house. And she was still trying to pretend and telling stuff like she just wanted some water, and this was a pretty house. But now she was also backing away, more yelling and shouting from Gramps and Mom, and the woman finally left. My mom locked the entrance, and now my Gramps was trying to calm her down, but she was shaking a lot. My mom told me later that the most scary part was that she didn't even notice the woman getting inside. I could have been seriously hurt or possibly taken hostage if she had been a bit more late. And the woman didn't even flinch when it was just my mom shouting at her with a big kitchen knife in her hand. So she was not scared of my mom at all, and she's probably looking for an opportunity to take her on. My mom has a small build, and that gypsy woman was tall, like much taller than my mom. No wonder she was prepared to take her chances. So this happened less than 30 minutes ago, and I immediately thought of this sub and wanted to see what y'all thought. I'm a single female living alone on the 3rd floor of a row home in Philadelphia. The house has been modified into 3 separate apartment units, and I am on the top floor. I rent through a property management group, and a few days ago, they let me know that they'd be sending someone out to repitch my window AC as it had been leaking and water was getting in through the window downstairs. Old building, more their problem than mine. Cool, no problem. They send out a guy who I assume they have contracted, but is not necessarily a part of the property management group. He comes in, makes some light small talk about me and my 2 cats, and gets to work. Nothing out of the ordinary. He finishes in about 15 minutes, lets me know he is done, and leaves my unit. About 2 minutes later, I hear him knock on my door again. I usher for him to come in, and he proceeds to ask me if I have an extra key for the main door downstairs. I tell him that my neighbors, whom I'm close friends with, have my only extra copy and that I only have one in my possession. He then proceeds to ask about nearby Home Depot and the questioning as to the closest place he can get a key copied. I ask him straight up if he's implying that I give him my key so he can go make a copy, and he says yes, that the property management group asked him to ask me while I was there because they lost theirs. I politely told him that that was not going to happen and suggested that he take it up with them if that's the case. I then called my property management company to confirm this information with them / report the incident just in case. They will never answer the phones, so I ended up leaving a voicemail and plan to follow up with an email instead. Small detail to add. I could have sworn I heard him messing with one of the doors downstairs after he left my unit the second time. The key to the main building is obviously different than the keys to get into each of our individual units, so having a key to the main door is only the first step. But being that both I and the unit below me are single females alone, I didn't like this one bit. This is weird, right? Or am I bugging? Update. My property management group answered the second time I called. My guess is that I was speaking to one of the leasing agents. She was pretty useless, sounded unbothered when I told her the story, and basically said she would just follow up with a contractor. But that she really didn't know anything about the service order because this was not a property she personally managed. I plan to give the other tenants a heads up. In his defense, he did not give me any weird vibes prior to, and even in his requests, he sounded innocuous enough. However, I don't know which door he was messing with, downstairs or main. He was messing with one, though. I thought about popping out to ask him what he was doing, but instead I opted to call my neighbor friend and loudly explain to her the situation that had just occurred, making sure to emphasize that I thought it was weird and that I was calling the property management company to fact check. The walls in this place are thin. If I could hear him, he could definitely hear me. This happened to me last week, and I've been scared shitless, but I didn't know if I wanted to post until today. I'm still living with my parents, so naturally I still have chores to do around the house. Washing the dishes, cleaning the house, etc. Since it was Monday and trash day in my neighborhood is every Tuesday and Thursday, my dad reminded me to take the trash out. It was late, and usually I would have already done it by then, but I was studying and it slipped my mind. I have a long driveway and it's not exactly well lit, so going out there isn't my favorite thing to do at night. Usually I take one trash can at a time, and this time was no different either. But as I was on about the third one, I noticed some older looking guy walking slowly on the other side of the street with his hands in his pockets. We made eye contact for a second, but after I set the trash can down, I turned away quickly so I could get to the other one. I was a bit unsettled, but I didn't want to just run back to the house because I still had a few trash cans to go, so I decided I would just push through and get the rest of them. When I grabbed the next trash can to take it up, I noticed that the man was still staring me down. Thinking back on it, I probably should have handled it better because you just never know with people these days, but instead I had my mind set on taking the rest of these cans up. No joke, this man watched me as I took each one of the rest of those trash cans up, and when I went back to my house after I was done, he was gone. I told my dad, and he told me if something like this happens again to run back into the house and call the cops. Well, the reason I decided to post this is because it happened again today. I didn't want to shit myself, so I decided to take out the trash right after I got home from school. And since my dad leaves right after he picks me up, I wanted to do it before he got back. The moment I stepped back out to deal with the trash, a Chevy truck drove past slowly, and I could see the man in the passenger seat with his seat reclined a bit like he was trying to hide his face from me. There was another man in the driver's seat, and once he noticed that I saw him, he accelerated away. Maybe I'm overreacting, but my gut is telling me that something is off and I can't ignore it. What should I do? This story dates back to spring 2016. At the time, I was in my late 20s. I was young and fit with very long blonde hair, a total hippie chick that had quit her job to travel the US with my ex at the time, pre-pandemic, before the van life tiny house community really took off. We left our home in the Midwest of January that year after holiday celebrations, saying goodbye to friends and family. By sometime in April or early May, we made it to southern Texas and decided to check out Padre Island National Seashore. For those of you unfamiliar with Padre Island, it is a seashore that you can drive right onto with your vehicle. My now ex and I were in a 26-foot Class C 1976 Chevy motorhome. We drove it into the island at nighttime, and waking up the next morning was the most insane and phenomenal experience. The ocean was a mere 15 feet away. I mean, the visual was so breathtaking. I will never forget it. We arrived on a Thursday or Friday, and the beach was beyond packed. Another thing for people unfamiliar with Padre, it is where many Texans, high schoolers and college kids mainly, flock for their spring break. Spring break was just the week prior to when we got there, or maybe still going on. Either way, it was busy, and we had an awesome weekend partying away. During this weekend, we noticed that workers for the park would often drive down the beach. They were very protective of their sea turtle population there and would slowly drive by in marked vehicles a few times a day. By Monday morning, we awoke to find the entire island emptied out. When I tell you we were literally the only ones, both when you look left or right, we were the only ones for what seemed like miles. It was a gorgeous morning, so I walked the dog quickly and then came inside to sit at our pop-up dining room table and do some journaling. My ex was asleep on the very back couch. We were backed in with the windshield facing the ocean, so of course I took a seat looking towards the beautiful view. Maybe 15 minutes after I sat down to journal, a gray beat-up pickup truck drove by kind of quickly, heading towards the direction of the park entrance. That was the first activity I'd seen on the island that morning and thought nothing of it. However, maybe 5 to 10 minutes later, that same truck came driving back past our RV, this time much slower. The man driving the pickup was going so slow, in fact, that he made eye contact with me for several seconds as he went by. He also seemed to drive closer to our vehicle in order to better see inside. Alarm bells should have been ringing at this point, but I kind of just shrugged it off. I was very much in my free spirit phase and was not easily put off. This is where it gets really creepy. So obviously this guy needed to turn back since he was driving away from the park entrance again. But I was honestly minding my own business, and I kind of immediately put him in the back of my mind. But yes, several minutes later, another 10 minutes, the man came back. But this time, he pulled directly up to our RV with his truck, essentially nose to nose at a 45-degree angle, to appear as if we were giving him a jump. Not far-fetched for a 70s vehicle on the salty beach, but he was blocking us in. It was at this point my heart dropped and I began to get scared. I screamed my ex's name immediately and he jumped up from the couch. I know he could hear the panic in my voice. I'll never forget how quickly he got up and how he had his arms spread across while he ducked down to see through the windshield. He was 6'5", very bearded, and I'm 1,000% sure the only reason the man in the gray beat-up truck sped off like a bat out of hell was because of him. It took several minutes for my heart rate to return to normal. My ex and I just looked at each other, like that was the most unusual encounter on our trip. Surprisingly, we stayed another week after that in the same spot. The idea never entered my head that the man could bring reinforcement and come back for me/us. I was so very, foolishly, fearless and naive back then. Anyway, it wasn't until later that day that another fact dawned on me. When my ex and I had arrived over the weekend, we only pulled out one camping chair. That one camping chair was in plain sight next to our RV outside. Prior to this spot, we had never done that. We always had both chairs out. But we ended up using driftwood to sit on when we were out by our bonfire, so that was the nails in the coffin for me. The scary man in the gray truck absolutely thought I was a young girl all alone, and I still wonder to this day, almost 10 years later, what all he had in mind for me that morning. ETA, out of curiosity, I just Googled Padre Island National Seashore Murder, and it looks like a murder of an RV couple occurred in 2019. Chills. When I was about 15, 8 years ago, I had a few very eerie encounters with my dad's friend. My dad was abusive growing up and on drugs pretty heavily. My dad was doing some renovations on our back porch and had his friend helping him out. The first time I met him, the vibes were immediately off-putting. He had a little boy about 5 years of age. His wife stayed home a lot and he didn't work much. After meeting me, he kept asking my dad if I could babysit his son so his wife and him could go out on a date night. I reluctantly agreed after being asked more than a few times. The night of babysitting his son, everything was fine until he returned home. He sat on the couch and asked me about the night. He kept offering me to sit on his lap. I kept declining. I lived a few blocks away, so I decided to walk home. He kept attempting to find ways to get me to stay. He asked if I wanted to stay and play with his son, but I grew more uncomfortable. I finally walked home and told my dad about it. He brushed it off. He also tried to constantly hug me, and one time he sat next to me on the couch while he came over and tried to put his hand on my leg. His friend continued to come over to help my dad on his renovations. He started to make comments about how I am mature for my age and I have a womanly figure. He'd constantly stare at me and begin to stop me more frequently. I lived in a small town that was pretty safe. The town graveyard was huge and had a lot of trails. It was also literally in my backyard behind my fence line. I'd walk my chihuahua there every day. He lived right across the street from the entrance of the graveyard. One day, as usual, I was walking my dog. I usually put in my earbuds and listen to music. A particular part of the trail was secluded with trees and was pretty hidden. I was always observant and paranoid, so I'd frequently check my surroundings. As I was walking through the secluded area, his truck was slowly creeping behind me. I took my earbuds out and quickened my pace. He sped up, coming to a stop and rolling down his window, and then he proceeded to tell me he was going to the store and he could take me home afterwards if I went with him. He also mentioned that he knows my dad, so I was safe. I told him I was headed home and I didn't need a ride. He was persistent, and he kept saying that my little dog was tired from walking and it'd be a quick stop to the store, which was all the way over on the other side of town. After a while, he was agitated that I said no and finally drove off. I heard a few months later that he went to jail for beating his wife with a hammer and strangling her. She apparently divorced him, and he broke into her house and tried to kill her. My dad believed me about everything that happened, and he was so upset. He finally cut him off. Haven't seen that guy since. I still think about it from time to time, and I'm grateful I wasn't harmed by him. When I was 14, 15, I used to have absolutely no stranger danger awareness at all. I didn't mind being out at night on my own. Not that I was much at that age. I'd go back down the streets on my own. Any basic safety techniques just didn't bother me because I thought I'd always be fine. One day I was walking back from town and thought I'd take my usual shortcut down the alleyways behind the high street. I'm quite happily walking when I round the corner to a guy who's loitering, and we lock eyes straight away. I thought the polite thing to do was smile, and thankfully he smiled back. I decided he's no threat and walked right by him. Then I hear him say something about my smile. I shout thanks over my shoulder and carry on. I turn down another corner, and so does he. Now saying he likes my trainers, so I yell another thanks. He asks where I got them. I say I don't know. Now I'm speeding up because this dude's definitely following me. I turn down onto the main road where I know there'll be people, hoping this will deter him. Nope, there he is, following behind. Still trying to get me to engage. I come to a busy section and I know he's about to catch up with me. As safely as I could, which was probably not that safe, I bolt across the road, leaving him waiting on the other side, still shouting something to me. I ran across another road and dived into a convenience store and called the person who was looking after me at the time, who told me to stay there and she was coming to get me. Whilst I'm on the phone to her, I see the man around the corner looking around. He's even checking between cars and everything. Thankfully, he gave up pretty quickly and seemed to leave. My care worker called the police and 2 officers came, and they weren't overly concerned. I guess he hadn't really technically done anything. Interestingly, they did seem to know from the description who it was likely to be, and they said we are in touch with the people who work with him and will feed it back. Anyways, about 4 days later, I go to the coffee place I used to read in, not far from there. It didn't even cross my mind I might see him again. In my head, it was all sorted, done, dusted. I take a seat near the toilets and start reading when the toilet door opens and a big blue coat I described to the police a few days earlier emerges. I stare at him in fear. He briefly regards me, then carries on past. I have no idea if he recognized me or not. It didn't seem like it. Safe to say, I'm a lot more careful now. When I was 16, female, I was walking to a store near my house. I was a huge pothead and would walk to the neighborhood nearby to get my stuff and then take a shortcut through said neighborhood to the store to get blunt wraps. I was walking through an abandoned apartment building, and a very nice dressed man was walking through and asked me how I was doing. I ignored him and kept walking. In the area I was walking, there's not really white men in suits, so I was thrown off. I get to the store and I'm walking back, and a white truck is parked in the corner of the apartment building, so I opted to go the long way on the busy street. The truck drove up to me, and the same man jumped out and picked me up so fast I didn't even have time to think. I was only 100 pounds at the time and wasn't nearly as strong as him. I tried to scream and hit him with my elbow, but no luck. A lady that's heavily on drugs, that's always walking around my city, came running at us and yelling to put me down. He actually put me down and sped off. Almost 10 years later, I always stopped to give the woman food and actually just paid for her to get rehab, and now she's doing great, reunited with her grandchildren and working. Not as creepy as the other stories on here, but definitely never walked alone again after that. The other day, I went to the clinic and parked a car in the parking lot dedicated for the building. It was the afternoon, but still bright outside. There's always sketchy people and homeless around the city, but I don't generally encounter dangerous things in the area. I walked to my car and sat in it for a bit, calling my boyfriend with an update. My car was parked right beside a sidewalk, so when I saw someone come up to the driver's side area, I didn't think anything of it. But then I turned my head, noticed a lady peering into my car as she slowly walked by. She stopped a short distance from my car on the other side and just stood there. There's no bus stop there, no reason I can think of for her to wait. She was carrying a large backpack, another bag, and looked like she was listening to music. I noticed this lady glance at me a few times while I was on my phone. I didn't think too much of it at the time. Then she came walking back to my car slowly and looking in my car. This time she went behind my car and stood there with her back towards the car. She was pretty much standing in the middle of the parking lot. I peered into my rearview mirror and she was just swaying back and forth and had big headphones on. I noted to my boyfriend of the suspicious behavior. She glanced backwards towards my rearview window approximately 3 times. At this point, I figured this person was up to no good and was worried she was looking for an opportunity to rob me. When vehicles drove past her in the parking lot, she wouldn't even move for them. My boyfriend advised me to start the car and start backing up to see what she would do. The second I started my car, she turned around to look at me and then went back to the sidewalk and took off down the street. I don't know if this person was waiting for me to get out of my car to rob me or was waiting for an opportunity to try and steal my car. The whole thing has me feeling super unsettled all day. Let's start with the basics. I'm a 26 male, and I work at a blind store where I'm alone during my shift. I work from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m., Monday through Friday. It's a simple job, and most of the time I just look at my computer, do some customer service, offer quotation to a very few people that enter the store, and so on. So like I said, it's very boring and not much happens. But lately, something started to catch my attention. I've noticed that across the street, someone is looking directly at the store, more precisely, looking at me. I don't handle cash at the store. We mostly work with credit or debit card, so I don't think that they're planning on robbing the store or something like that. I've noticed that there is a telescope on the window, and it's pointed directly at my desk, so I think it's very obvious that this person is looking at me. I left my phone recording at me while I do some work for like an hour, hour and a half, and I can see in the recording that this person moves the telescope once in a while, and that when I go to the restroom, the telescope moves while trying to find me. So yeah, I have not seen the face of this person or anything, but surely enough, this is creepy. Okay, so thank you guys for all the comments and responses this post had. I didn't expect to get this attention, so here goes some more info about the situation I'm in and more details about the store. 1. This person is looking at my desk through a door, so my blinds can't protect me in here. In addition to this, I moved the desk closer to the wall, so this person can't see me anymore. I just did this because I was getting a video proof that this person's behavior. 2. I just found out about the stalker this Tuesday. I don't know if he or she has been doing this for weeks. I just noticed now, so I'm already being really careful when I get off work. 3. After reading all your suggestions, I've decided to go and have a little chat with the building administrator and show her all the evidence I've collected. I will do this today, and I may update this weekend if something worth mentioning happens. If not, then on Monday I will update this post. Update 2. So I already showed all the evidence to the building administrator, let's call her Anna, and she was shocked, even more when she saw the telescope showing through the window of the apartment. She told me that the apartment that has the telescope is being used by 2 girls, maybe in their early 20s, and these 2 girls are weird. The apartments are small, but they are not cheap, and these 2 girls started living in them almost 2 months ago. She told me that she doesn't see these girls leave the apartment very often, and most of the food/groceries are delivered to these girls via delivery guys. But something that does occur is that a man comes to the apartment every 2 or 3 days and leaves early in the morning. This man is the one who actually made the rental agreement and pays for the apartment, so he's probably paying the food and rent of these 2 girls. Now, Anna says that when the rental agreement took place, the man said that these 2 girls would be living here because of college, but she hasn't seen these 2 girls go to college or anything like that. So yeah, this is weird. Apparently, Anna is going to speak about the issue to the owner of the building and the man who signed the rental agreement, so this activity, like the stalking, stops. I will update if I learn anything else. Last update, ? Okay, so this weekend I didn't think too much about the situation anymore. I tried to enjoy my days off without worrying about my job. So just today I came to work, opened the store, and began to work. Then I noticed that the window on the apartment was closed. This window is always open. And I noticed that the telescope was no longer there. I sent a message to Anna asking if she could tell me anything about those girls and if something was done about the stalking. Apparently, Anna, the building owner, and this mysterious man had a short conversation this Saturday. They called the man on the phone and asked him if he could talk about some of the complaints of the apartment. Then told the man that the girls were harassing the stores in the front of the building. Lucky me, they didn't say I was the one who complained. They told the man that this behavior should stop because that's not something the tenant should do. So far, the man has been listening and paying attention to those requests. Everything was normal up to that point, but then the building owner made a question. It was a quick question. What career are they studying? Anna says that the man changed his attitude completely and said that they should mind their own business and just left. Sunday comes and the man calls Anna to give her the keys to the apartment. He didn't explain why or said anything else. He just gave her the keys and left. Anna is very confused and is also worried about the girls, mainly because she didn't see them when they left. I told her that maybe they left early in the morning, like the man used to do. I asked if there was something wrong with the apartment, like missing stuff or damaged item, but Anna said everything was fine, nothing was stolen or broken. Also, I asked if she heard noise, yelling, or anything like that Saturday night. Nothing, she says. She is thinking about filing a complaint with the police because it feels wrong that they would just leave like that. If you ask me, I think the reason they left was because the building owner asked about the girls. I don't know what to think about this. If Anna does end up going to the police, I will probably provide my testimony or something if it's helpful. I hope I don't have to update this post again because I wouldn't want to know more about this than I should.